Part 5, Chapter 11 of the Manxman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Manxman by Sir Caine, Part 5, Chapter 11. The crowd on Tynwald had now gathered thick down the neck of the enclosure and dense round the mount. To the strains of the national anthem, played by the band of the regiment, the Governor had come out of the church. He was in cocked hat and with sword, and the sword of state was carried upright before him. With his keys, council, and clergy, he walked to the hilltop. There he took one of the two chairs under the canopy. The other was taken by the bishop in his lawn. Their followers came behind and broke up on the hill into an indiscriminate mass. A number of ladies were admitted to the space on the topmost mound. They stood behind the chairs, with their parasols still open. There are men that the densest crowd will part and make way for. The crowd had parted and made way for Philip. As the court was being fenced, he appeared with his companion at the foot of the mount. There he was recognised by many, but he scarcely answered their salutations. The Governor made a deferential bow, smiled, and beckoned to him to come up to his side. He went up slowly, pausing at every other step, like a man who was in doubt if he ought to go higher. At length he stood at the Governor's right hand, with all eyes upon him, for the favourite of the great is favoured. He was then the highest figure on the mount, the Governor and the Bishop being seated. The people could see him from end to side of the Tynwald, and he could see the people as they stood closely packed on the green below. The business of the court began. It was that of promulgating the laws. Philip's senior colleague, the old Deemster of the happy face, read the titles of the laws in English. Then the coroner of the Premier Sheeding began to recite the same titles in Manx. Nobody heard them. Hardly anybody listened. The ladies on the mount chatted among themselves, the keys and the clergy intermingled and talked, the officials of the council looked at the crowd, and the crowd itself, having nothing to hear, no more to see, indifferent to doings they could not understand, resumed their amusements among the frivolities of the fair. There were 3 persons in that assembly of 15,000 who were following the course of events with feverish interest. The first of these was the Governor, whose restless eyes were rolling from side to side with almost savage light. The second was the captain of the regiment, who was watching the Governor's face for a signal. The third was Philip, who was looking down at the crowd and seeing something that had meant for himself alone. The fishermen came up quietly, 3,000 strong. 100 of them lounged around the magazine. The ammunition was at their command. The rest pushed, edged, and elbowed their way through the people until they came to the line of the guard. Wherever there was a red coat, behind it there were 3 jerseys and stocking caps. Philip saw it all from his elevation on the mount. His face was deadly pale, his eyelids wavered, his lower lip trembled, his hand twitched. When he was spoken to, he hardly answered. He was like a man holding counsel with himself, and half in fear that everybody could read his hidden thoughts. He was in the last throes of his temptation. The decisive moment was near. It was heavy with the fate of his afterlife. He thought of Pete and the torture of his company, of Kate and the unending misery of her existence, of himself and the deep duplicity to which he was committed. From all this he could be freed for ever. By what? By doing nothing, having already done his duty? Only let him command himself, and then relief from an existence enthralled by torment, from constant alarm and watchfulness, peace, sleep, love, Kate. Somebody was speaking to him over his shoulder. It was nothing, only the quip of a witty fellow, descendant of a Spanish freebooter. Ladies caught his eye, smiled and bowed to him. A little man, whose swarthy face showed African blood, reached up and quoted something about the bounds of freedom wide and wider. The coroner had finished. The proceedings were at an end. There was a movement. Something had happened. The Governor had half risen from his chair. 12 men in sea boots and blue jerseys had passed the line of the guard, and were standing midway across the steps of the mount. One of them was beginning to speak. It was Pete. "Governor," he said, but the captain of the regiment was abreast of him in a moment, and a score of the soldiers were about his companions at the next breath. The fishermen stood their ground like a wall, and the soldiers fell back. There was hardly any scuffle. "Governor," said Pete again, touching his cap. The Governor was twisting in his seat. Looking first at Pete and then at the captain, he was in the act of lifting his hand when suddenly it was held by another hand at his side, and a low voice whispered at his ear, "No, sir, for God's sake, no." It was Philip. The Governor looked at him with amazement. "What do you mean?" "I mean," said Philip, still whispering over him hotly and impetuously, "that there's only one way back to Government House, but if you lift your hand it will be one too many. I mean that if blood is shed you'll never live to leave this mount. I mean that your 300 soldiers are only as 300 rabbits in the claws of 3,000 crows." At the next instant he had left the Governor and was face to face with the fisherman. "Fisherman," he cried, lifting both hands before him, "let there be no trouble here today, no riot, for God's sake, no bloodshed. Listen to me. I am the grandson of a fisherman. I have been a fisherman myself. I love the fishermen. As long as I live I will stand by you. Your rights shall be my rights, your sins my sins, and where you go I will go too." Then, swinging back to the Governor, he bowed low and said in a deferential voice, "Your Excellency, these men mean no harm. They wish to speak to you. They have a petition to make. They will be loyal and peaceable." But the Governor, having recovered from his first fear, was now in a flame of anger. "No," he said with the accent of authority, "this is no time and no place for petitions." "Forgive me, your Excellency," said Philip with a deeper bow. "This is the time of all times, the place of all places." There had been a general surging of the Keys and clergy towards the steps, and now one of them cried out of their group, "Is Tynwald Court to be turned into a bear garden?" And another said in a cynical voice, "Perhaps your Excellency has taken somebody else's seat." Philip raised himself to his full height, and answered, with his eyes on the speakers, "We are free-born men on this island, your Excellency. We did not come to Tynwald to learn order from the grandson of a Spanish pirate, or freedom from the son of a black chief." "Hold hard, boys," cried Pete, lifting one hand against his followers, as if to keep them quiet. He was boiling with a desire to shout till his throat should crack. The Governor had exchanged rapid looks and low whispers with the captain. He saw that he was outwitted, that he was helpless, that he was even in personal danger. The captain was biting his leg with vexation that he had not reckoned more seriously with this rising, that he had not drawn up his men in column. "Your Excellency will hear the fisherman?" said Philip. "No, no, no," said the Governor. He was at least a brave man, if a vain and foolish one. There was silence for a moment. Then, standing erect and making an effort to control himself, Philip said, "May it please your Excellency, you fill a proud position here. You are the ruler of this island under your sovereign lady, our Queen. But we, your subjects, your servants, are in a prouder position still. We are Manxmen. This is the court of our country." "Hold hard," cried Pete again. "For 1,000 years men with our blood and our names have stood on this hill to hear the voice of the people, and to do justice between man and man. That's what the place was meant for. If it has lost that meaning, root it up. It is a show and a sham." "Bravo!" cried Pete. He could hold himself in no longer, and his word was taken up with a shout, both on the hill and on the green beneath. Philip's voice had risen to a shrill cry, but it was low and meek, as he added, bowing yet lower while he spoke, "Your Excellency will hear the fisherman?" The Governor rolled in his seat. "Go on," he said impatiently. The men made their petition. 3 or 4 of them spoke briefly and to the point. They had had harbours, their fathers' harbours, which had been freed to them 40 years before. Don't ask them to pay harbour dues until proper harbours were provided. The Governor gave his promise. Then he rose, the band struck up "God Save the Queen," and the legislature filed back to the chapel. Philip went with them. He had fought a great battle, and he had prevailed. Through purging fires the real man had emerged, but he had paid the price of his victory. His eye burned like live coal. His cheekbones seemed to have upheaved. He walked alone. His ancient colleague had stepped ahead of him. But now and again, as he passed down the long path to the church door, fishermen and farmers pushed between the rifles of the guards and said in husky voices, "Let me shake you by the hand, Dempster." The scene was repeated with added emotion half an hour afterwards, When the court being adjourned and the Governor gone in ominous silence, Philip came out, white and smiling, and leaning on the arm of his old master, the Clerk of the Rolls. He could scarcely tear himself through the thick-set hedge of people that lined the path to the gate. As he got into the carriage his smile disappeared. Sinking into the seat, he buried himself in the corner and dropped his head on his breast. The people began to cheer. "Drive on," he cried. The cheering became loud. "Drive, drive," he cried. The people cheered yet louder. They thought that they had seen a grand triumph that day, a man triumphing over the Governor. But there had been a grander triumph which they had not seen, a man triumphing over himself. Only one saw that, and it was God. End of Part 5, Chapter 11.